Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. Whether you have just finished work, on the road, or even having a meal right now, we welcome you to Wishes for Change. To begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we meet on and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So my name is Melissa Abigazala, the founder and the CEO of the Top Blokes Foundation. So I know you all know this, but the Top Blokes Foundation is a youth mental health charity dedicated to supporting young males to live healthy and safe lives. So as supporters, donors, and champions of Top Blokes, I'm thrilled that you are joining us right now. It's been a huge year for Top Blokes. It's actually been our biggest year yet. And over the last few weeks, we have seen thousands, not just hundreds, but thousands of young males graduate the Top Blokes mentoring programs. And our team have been busy crunching the numbers. So I'm pleased to share that this year, our team of mentors have delivered over 390 Top Blokes programs and over 60,000 mentoring hours. So how many young men have we supported? Well, drum roll. We have supported over 4,600 young males who completed our 3 to 6 month mentoring programs, which means every week, boys as young as 10 years old up to 24 years old would show up to the Top Blokes program and be open to learning, connecting, and growing. And we simply couldn't do this without your support. So thank you. Today, we are exploring a topic that is top of mind for government, for research bodies, and for organisations, and one that is actually very important to the young males that we engage with. And that topic is loneliness and social connection. Two themes that I think often aren't associated with young males, but one that is prevalent and felt significantly by young men themselves. Shortly, we will welcome Dr Christina Jarron, Top Blokes Foundation's Research Manager, who will present research on how loneliness impacts young men's health. Following this, we'll hear from our esteemed panel of young men who are part of the Top Blokes Youth Advisory Council. They will share their stories, experiences with Top Blokes and with the topic of loneliness and connection, and their personal wishes for change, wishes that they have for other young men like themselves. So we hope by the end of this session that we inspire action and change. But you might be wondering, what has prompted wishes for change? Well, when talking with our Youth Ambassador Council members a few months ago, we would hear comments like, I just wish other young men could, or I wish other young men would. I mean, they could see young men around them struggle and need additional support. So they are the ones who created and are leading this appeal in hope to get more support to reach more young males going into 2025. And we want to thank you all for joining us. As a charity, it is supporters like yourself that help make a difference to so many young men. To find out more about Wishes for Change, we'll add the website link to the chat as well. So after the panel, we'll also hear from two of our mentors, Nick and Keely, who will share their experiences. And interestingly, they have collectively mentored over 300 young males this year, and who are constantly witnessing the growth and transformation of the young males who complete our Top Blokes mentoring programs. And of course, we want this to be interactive. So we'll have a live Q&A towards the end. Be sure to use the Q&A box to submit your questions to Christina, to the young males, and to our mentors, Nick and Keely as well. So why don't we get started? I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Christina Jarron, an accomplished researcher in the not-for-profit sector and Top Blokes Foundation's research manager. Christina has been studying the effects of loneliness and the role of connection and only last week represented Top Blokes Foundation and provided evidence at the New South Wales parliamentary hearing on the inquiry of loneliness, a significant opportunity to ensure that young males are not left behind when designing social policy. Christina, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much, Mel. It's great to be here tonight. As you mentioned, there's been a lot of recent discussion about loneliness in Australia, and young males are impacted by this. So today I'm going to share 4 insights with you all to help us understand this better. These insights that I'm going to share with you come from Australian and international research into male mental health, young people, masculinities, educational outcomes, and more. They also come from young males themselves who shared their thoughts with us to help inform a submission that we recently made to the inquiry that Mel has already mentioned, the New South Wales Government inquiry into social isolation and loneliness. So I'm going to start with insight 1. We heard that young males want more opportunities to meaningfully connect. Some are feeling disconnected and lonely. When we look at the data, it tells us that 1 in 4 young males report experiencing social isolation and almost 1 in 5 feel lonely. So the graph on the slide there is showing rates of social isolation. This is the latest data we have from the Hilda survey. And you can see on this graph that young males are reporting experiencing social isolation at the highest rates of all other age and gender groupings. And those orange lines down the middle of the graph on either side are the average numbers. So why is this the case? Well, the young males that we spoke to gave us 3 reasons. They told us that they have limited opportunities for authentic connection based on shared interests and values. They told us that we need to look beyond the classroom to foster connection and belonging. And they told us that they need access to more opportunities to express themselves. This will increase help-seeking behaviours and positive health choices. So insight 2, we need to be aware of how young males can feel socially isolated at school. And this is where young people spend most of their day. So this finding is really important. There are various reasons for this, including that many young males don't find their tribe in school settings. They might be in school settings simply because of geography and age. That's not enough to build those close bonds. We also know that there are some points in young males' lives where they struggle more with loneliness and social isolation. So, for example, starting secondary school, that's a big key transition point, as well as those years 7 to 9. During these transition points, friendship groups are changing. There's a lot going on development-wise, and young males might also stop participating in activities like sport that they once enjoyed and which gave them access to a community outside of school. But there are other stats, the ones that are on the screen now, that I want to share with you that tell us another important part of this story. So these stats on the screen now are the 2023 school suspension stats from the Department of Education in New South Wales. So there are 2 reasons you could be suspended from a school in New South Wales: causing harm to a person and creating an unacceptable risk. When we look at the gender of those people that have been suspended from school, we see that males are very much overrepresented. It evens out a little in secondary school, but we're still seeing male students being overrepresented in suspension stats. Now, this is alarming because research indicates a clear relationship between school suspension and behaviours that risk the health and well-being of young people and which are connected to risk factors for loneliness and social isolation. A few examples are an increased likelihood of not completing school, involvement in illegal behaviour, or association with antisocial peers, though there are more. So these suspension rates, they're so stark, they show us that there is a bigger problem and that we need to understand the root causes of what leads to suspension and address this. So if we look at the individual level, that could be neurodiversity, it could be mental health issues, it could be complex family lives, but there's also work we can do to support teachers to build better relationships with male students. For example, helping teachers to manage disruptive behaviours that boys may exhibit in a way that doesn't lead to suspension. And some schools have trialled a boys' mentor to support the mental health needs of male students. There is an equivalent position for girls, the supervisor of female students, but not for boys. Now, we're aware of a school in the Illawarra in New South Wales that trialled the boys' mentor at a cost of approximately $15,000 and found significant decreases in non-attendance, detentions, and suspensions among boys. So by reducing the risk of social and educational exclusion and supporting boys to participate in their education, we believe this role, the boys' mentor in schools, will lead to better health outcomes for young males, including improving social connectedness. So now we're on to insight 3. Young males can struggle to ask for help when they need it. There's Australian and international research that indicates that socially dominant forms of masculinity can impact the help-seeking behaviours and health choices of males. And this is a really important lens through which to understand young males' experiences of social isolation and loneliness. The internalisation of socially dominant forms of masculinity, like self-reliance, stoicism, toughness, can impact on the resilience of young males and their sense of identity. Research has found that one particular element of socially dominant forms of masculinity, self-reliance, i.e. not asking for help, is related to poorer mental health, higher levels of suicidal ideation, and lower use of mental health services. Not reaching out for help can also lead to increased health risk behaviours, including dangerous behaviour while intoxicated and alcohol use as a coping strategy. It can also, very sadly, lead to suicide. So while young males are less likely to report a mental health issue than young males have a higher rate of death by suicide. So there was a study of coronial data over 2006 to 2015 in Australia, which found that 73.5% of young people aged 10 to 24 years who died by suicide in that time period were young men. There's also a fantastic longitudinal study called 10 to Men, which has found that 1 in 5 young males and 1 in 4 adult men in Australia report that they'd thought about hurting themselves or have had thoughts of suicide at some point in their life. When you think about this alongside other research that indicates that males who are distressed have low engagement with mental health services, you see there's a big problem. This corresponds with research that indicates low engagement of males in health promotion initiatives in general. And researchers have argued that this situation indicates a role for prevention strategies and programs that target the mental health and psychosocial stresses that are impacting young people. And this should include efforts to strengthen the social connection of young males and improve their health literacy as protective factors against social isolation and loneliness. And this brings us to the final insight I'm going to share with you, insight 4, which is related to the key characteristics of initiatives that mitigate and reduce loneliness and social isolation among young males. So as we heard before, school is not enough. Young males want and need opportunities for meaningful connection outside of school. We also know that they need prolonged contact. So programs that have multiple points of contact and sessions of longer duration as opposed to one-off workshops are the most helpful. And there's not conclusive evidence on the ideal duration of programs, but current thinking is 16 hours or more of program time across multiple points. And this is what our 14 to 17 and 18 to 24 programs offer. And in our experience, this helps the young males that we work with build connections with each other and with their Top Blokes mentor. And we also found that positive male role models are critical to reducing social isolation and loneliness among young males. When a role model demonstrates openness and transparency, young men feel less alone and they can build up the trust and rapport that they need to open up to someone. And these role models can be famous and they can be everyday people as well. And just reflecting on the inquiry that Dan and I attended last week, they were really interested in our submission in general, but they asked us how we can help young males build better connections. And we're very interested in improving connections online. How can young men have better experiences online? And while we outlined some options, we really emphasised to the committee that they should seek feedback from young males themselves. You know, young men have so many ideas based on real life experiences, and it's certainly been our experience that they are very happy to share if you're willing to listen. And so we've offered to help connect government with young males. So watch this space, might hear something about that in the future. And that's my breeze through the research into social isolation and loneliness among young males. If you want to know more, if you're really into the research and you want to read the papers directly yourself, have a look at our submission to the government inquiry. We're going to be posting the link in the chat in a minute, and you can learn more. It's also full of fantastic quotes from young men that really bring all this stuff to life. But thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you so much, Christine. And just before we wrap up your section, what do you feel are the opportunities that we might not necessarily think of when it does come to young men increasing their social connections? What is top of mind for you?
Well, certainly I think that finding around like, let's move on from let's not expect this to happen in a school classroom environment. That came through really strongly. And it made me personally reflect on the limitations of that environment for young males. And, having spaces and places and people that are outside of teachers and classrooms is absolutely critical. The other thing that came through really strongly was the peer mentoring element. And you'll see if you go to our submission, those who are listening, if you read the submission, you'll see beautiful stories in there about how connected the young men felt when they heard their classmates talking about their experiences. In some cases, these were boys they'd never really had anything to do with before. In other cases, these were boys they'd actually had really negative experiences with in the past. And then that experience of being in the Top Blokes program, of sharing and opening up, transformed that relationship and built a really strong connection. So those are the two things that come to mind for me.
Thank you. And I think I think what's really heartening is to know that at the inquiry, there really was an interest in young males. And I don't think it is, I don't think you normally associate loneliness and young males because you think social media, young people today are the most connected than maybe what they have been compared to previous generations. But this has obviously come through loud and clear in the research. And I think when we think about men's health and particularly young men's health, this was not a conversation we were having 15 years ago. And it's really good to see that government are now seeing that we do need to put a spotlight on young males and their connection to each other, to themselves, and to the wider community as well.
Yeah, absolutely. They were definitely very interested. It was very heartening. And we just really tried to drive home that point around actually connecting. Let's connect government and young men so they can hear from each other directly. That I think will be the game changer.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Christina Jarron.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So we have the research and the context now. So let's hear from the young males themselves. I'm so excited to introduce our Youth Ambassador Council panel. So our Youth Ambassador Council panel are made up of 10 young males who have completed the Top Blokes mentoring program within their high schools and then joined our graduate club program. So these young leaders who you're about to meet and the wider Youth Ambassador Council are the heartbeat of Top Blokes. They provide input into our government submissions, just as Christina shared. They provide feedback and input into our next 3-year strategic plan, so influencing the future of Top Blokes. They provide feedback on our programs and then leading this appeal as well. So these are pretty busy people with their roles on council, and they go to school full time and they have lives. Let's just remember that for a moment. And so today they're going to share their wishes for change and insights that we can all learn from. And so also remember, if you do have questions, we do have the Q&A box as well, if you did have any questions for the young men. So I would love to introduce to you, we have Salim, we have Reuven, we have Nick, and we have Daniel as well. So as they make their way onto the screen, hello, how are you, Salim? You good?
Feeling good, feeling good.
Yeah.
Yourself?
I'm good. I'm good. Hey, Dan. Hey, Nick. Feel free to take yourselves off mute. We want
Yoga.
your voices nice and loud. Lovely. Thank you. So I wish we had more time to spend together to chat. And I know I get a chance to chat to you all the time. And I feel really privileged to do that because you the three of you, but also the wider Youth Ambassador Council really give us a lot to think about at Top Blokes, and you really influence the way we think about some of the decisions we're going to make, and some of our thinking as well. So never underestimate how influential you are. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. So I thought to kind of just get us started.
Do you want me to take my shoes off? Fine.
We'll take turns. So Salim, I want to start with you. If you could kind of share when you did the Top Blokes program and like how you found the program and what the program meant for you.
So I started Top Blokes in year nine, about midway through year nine. And it was my well-being coordinator at the time who approached me for it. And he gave me this piece, it was at the end of school, so I was ready to leave. And he gave me the slip of paper. And Top Blokes program, your child's been invited to partake in it. And I was like, okay, I didn't know what I was being handed at first. And I'll be honest, I was a bit apprehensive at first to even join. I was like, this doesn't sound like it's much for me. I was too sucked into the stereotype of what it meant to be a good student, bad student. I at first I know it wasn't the best, but at the time I kind of had that black and white view. I thought, look, it's for the bad students. I'm a pretty good student. I don't need to do it. But I decided, why don't I just give it a go? I'll give it a go. There's no harm in doing it. And giving Top Blokes a go has been one of the most beneficial things for me. 100%. I can say that with utmost confidence. Because when I think about people who've come and they visited the school, you have about like a period with them. You have about 1 hour for them to funnel all this information down all these young boys, throats. You have this is bad and this isn't good for you and you should really start doing this. You only get that in an hour, and most of the time nothing really changes. From those boys after that hour, nothing really changes. And those people don't even come back again. But what Dr. Christina said before, that prolonged contact has really, really benefited not just me, but all the other boys who partook in the program as well. And as she mentioned before, I was surrounded with boys that I had either hung out with once or I had never spoken to. And those relationships still exist today. I see them around and I say, "Hey, how you going?" They say, "I'm all right." And there's no tension between us because I feel as if the reason why there's no tension between us is because we went through that program together. We were vulnerable with each other and we found out things that you wouldn't have known otherwise.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you for giving Top Blokes a go and not saying no to that original
No worries.
opportunity. Really appreciate that. Thanks, Lee. Daniel, want to share a little bit about your experience with the Top Blokes program?
So my experience with Top Blokes program, at first I was like, oh, like to some sort of program for bad students and that. And then like I was like, oh, don't really want to do this because like taking time out of school and that. And like I gave the note to my grandma, signed it off. Then I went to the first lesson. It was introducing everyone, and like I was still skeptical about it, but after like the first couple lessons and doing it, it was really good. It was pretty beneficial for me and what to learn about in top blokes. But yeah, it was just like learning about the different sort of aspects in life that young men or like children face was like a big thing. Yeah, so it was a good experience, so overall.
Fantastic. And Dan, you've just grown so much since your time at Top Blokes, but also through the grad club and the Youth Advisory Council as well. So thank you as well for giving Top Blokes a go. And Nick, when did you do the program and what did you get from the program?
Uh, what I would have finished the program at the end of semester one in 2022. Yeah, so year 10 at the time. As the other boys were saying, I was sort of on that skeptical side because I had my year advisor come to me with it, and I was just like, oh well, why are they trying to put me in here? But at the same time, I was trying to keep an open mind to it as well. Uh, but once I'd actually gone to that first lesson, and then I was actually enticed to come back the next, and then the next, and I found especially with the group that I was in there with, the actual camaraderie that it brought us, since we were actually, some of us were fairly known with each other, but it sort of it outlined a different perspective on themselves and each other, which I guess brought a much deeper connection between all of us as well. And with the way that it is facilitated, as it's not also them just our mentors funneling information into us, it's also them actually trying to have a proper conversation with us and not speaking down on us like some teachers would, which made that whole experience much easier, and it made us much easier for us to all connect with each other and our mentors.
Yeah. Oh, thanks so much, Nick. And you've just finished year 12, right?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, and how did you go? You excited for your future?
Yeah, I've got uni lined up, so I start that at the end of February next year, going into a Bachelor of Psychological Science.
Oh, amazing. Congratulations, Nick. And thank you. And I think especially for you having done the program, 2 years ago now, and to still have stayed involved with Top Blokes and with our grad club and obviously our Youth Ambassador Council, I think that's awesome. So we're here to talk about loneliness and social connection, and your wishes for change. And you each have a wish, which I'd love for you to share. And if you could maybe read out your wish, if you don't have it, I've got a copy as well, but also to kind of share like why this is your wish, and yeah, what inspired you to kind of hope this future for other young men. So Salim, I'm going to start with you. What is your wish for change?
So my wish for change was, I wish that more young men would be more in tune with themselves and their purpose, understanding their own healthy perspective of masculinity. As you can see, it's broken up into two parts: being in tune with themselves and their purpose, and then understanding their own healthy perspective of masculinity. I think what holds those two together is this one quote from Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, which I always usually go back to. And it's, there's no more roundabout discussion of what makes a good man. Be one. And I feel as if when I first started out the Top Blokes program, and then after ending it as well, Top Blokes had this one goal, and it was to inspire action and change by destroying that sort of instilled negative stereotype, or that toxic stereotype of masculinity, that be a man, get over it stereotype. And I feel like Top Blokes really proposes the question of, well, then what is a man? And I loved that. And that stood for everything that I stood for. And I feel as if nowadays, after my interview with Harry Garside, I was lucky enough to have that, and he put his own perspective on that too. But our world is so fast. It's really hyper. It's not slowing down anytime soon. And I think in such a fast-paced world, And especially within a confusing world, you're going to have a lot of young men who are confused and don't know what they're doing or where they're going. And that quote, I felt, encapsulated it all. Don't argue of I'm doing this and I'm good, because then anyone could play devil's advocate. Well, if I can do this, then I'm good. No, there shouldn't be an argument. Just be a good man. And I feel as if being or just striving to be a good man is a way that we as young men can hone that healthy perspective of masculinity. And especially going back to that first half with being more in tune with themselves and their purpose in a fast-paced world, like I said, there's no slowing down. And that finish line or the goal, that goal that you set for yourself, it's blurred, very, very blurred. And with lots of distractions, it's very easy to float around. You could set a really good goal for yourself. You could be even as strict as possible with yourself, but you're always going to be floating around. And that floating, it's good, it's always good to not, it's always good to sort of float around and get a feel for life. But that floating around can lead you down different paths away from your goal. And I feel as if within this generation of young men and within the next generation to come, unfortunately, young men are lacking purpose. And that purpose is what wakes us up every morning. And when young men wake up in the morning with no purpose, what's to do with life? What can you do? And then young men start to, I feel like that's a very big factor in what makes young men depressed. Slowly, 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 you're losing that idea of what your life should be. And that's the catalyst for, I think, a lot of young men's issues. So that's why I believe young men should be in tune with themselves, understanding what a good man is and their purpose, as well as understanding a healthy perspective of masculinity.
Sorry, how old are you again?
17 next year.
Amazing. That's very wise, Salim. And I think, you really hit the nail on the head. And you know what? And look, as an adult, it's probably something that adults also struggle with, is like working out what our purpose is. What are we waking up for? What is that bigger goal that we're striving for? And you're right, life is so fast and it's very hard to slow it down as well. And I think it's so inspirational to hear that, you've obviously taken your experience from Top Blokes, but you're trying to then support other young men in your life to find their purpose. And you're right, if you've got that purpose and you're super clear about it, like everything else, you're going to work your way through it as well. That's all.
I think, sorry, just to go on a little bit more, I think what's most comforting as well is that the Stoics were even asking these questions. These are very timeless questions, and I'm glad that we're all doing something about it.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Daniel, did you have your wish and would you like to share?
Yes. Yes, I do. I ended up sending them to Jason, and Jason sent them to Sarah.
Yep.
But I have two big wishes, like I feel like they're big to me, is just be happy about your self-worth and self-image and what you look like, and never put others down to make yourself feel better. Did you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, but the one I said first is really big to me because a lot of young male especially are so fixated on what they look like and that, and it's like helpful for them to realize that the way they look doesn't mean everything, like it's the way they act is what matters.
That's such a good point. And I think when we start talking about body image, I think, that, like, talking about stereotypes, the stereotype is that it's usually just associated with girls, but body image is also a real big thing or issue for young males as well.
But yeah, as my other point, never put others down to make yourself feel better about yourself is another big one, because I know a lot of males that do that. They body shame or just pick at someone for a disability or that, or just anything about them. to make themselves feel bad, just make themselves feel better about themselves, which is another big thing as well for me, because I used to do it and I've realized that it's not a good thing to do, though, because you never know what people are going through behind closed doors. So it's really made me think and change. But yeah, that's the other big point, though.
Absolutely. And Dan, can I ask how did you come to that realization that it wasn't good to put people down and that you should kind of think about the impact that it has on our other people? Like, that's a pretty good realization to have so young.
Well, I realized that after doing the Top Blokes program and hearing about other people's stories and that and what they've been through, when they were younger or behind closed doors and that, and what they have had to deal with. So that's another big thing. But also, I realized because when I was younger, I used to be a bit chubby and that. I used to get picked on a lot, and like that also made me realize that you should treat others the way you want to be treated, sort of thing.
Thank you. Thanks, Daniel, for sharing that. Really appreciate it. Nick, you've got a wish for change as well. What's your wish?
What mainly inspired my wish is a lot of what I actually see in my own personal world, which, well, my wish is that we're able to inspire future generations to be able to step up and not be a bystander within modern ideals, and using Top Blokes as that initial leap to reach out to more young men. And like I see this in my personal life a lot, especially since a lot of my, at least, male role models are a bit older. So I just see how their sort of communication style and their way of sort of being able to decompress is very different. And I know that with, at least, I see it in my uncles, they have their troubles, and they think to themselves that they've got to keep silent about it. They can't actually go and talk to someone about it. And it's the same sort of thing with my grandfathers and my father, that it's just being able to step up to have those sort of role models in the future generations' lives, so they're not going into the same stigmas that were put into place over previous generations.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, that's good. And so knowing that, you're pretty open about how you're feeling, and how do your family respond to that? Like you said, you want to make sure that, you're able to, live your life authentically, express yourself, and maybe you didn't necessarily see that in other members of the family. What do they think of that?
I mean, if I'm being honest, I haven't gotten too much of a response from most, but I feel like I have had a little bit of an effect as they've seen that I've been able to be a bit more open. I've seen that in my cousins as well, but also especially in my grandfather after we lost my grandmother earlier this year. After that had happened, he was actually able to open up a bit more and actually talk about how he was feeling, and not sort of just shutting off and doing what he was doing to try and decompress.
And I think, if anything, that shows that sometimes, like, I think sometimes the stereotype is that young people can't impact or create change or influence, but you can, right? And those little things that you're doing in your daily lives, just kind of living these values day in and day out, is actually having a ripple effect on people from other generations. And I think that's super powerful. So don't ever underestimate your ability to influence and show others, a way that they didn't get a chance to see when they were growing up as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to go back to Salim. So obviously, you all contributed to the government inquiry on loneliness and connection as well. So could you kind of share any sort of observations that you've had around young men feeling lonely, or kind of, like you spoke before about lacking purpose? Like, what have you kind of observed, and if you could recommend anything to adults and to government, like what would be top of mind for you?
It's a heavy question, but I'll do my best. I
Okay.
think I think in young men, a lot of the issues of loneliness, a lot of people want to say that it's the individual's fault that they're lonely, but there's always a bigger problem. There's always a root, I think. I think for especially in like I keep going back, today's fast-paced world. It really is the root because if you just take apart everything, we look at it is sorry, but it's just a good question. Is it okay if I bring up like what we talked about with like pornography and that or no?
Yeah, I mean, it's your panel, it's your forum. Share what you'd like.
Okay. Because that was one huge issue that we brought up a ton of times, especially regarding the inquiry review to Parliament. Pornography is such a huge issue. Um, it's sorry, seen in like the older generations too, but I don't think it's as big there as it is for us young men. And we all put our own view on that. But my view is that pornography just starts as a root that then kind of expands because then you start getting insecure about yourself. And then it starts impacting your relationships. And then once pornography starts to impact your relationships and your own insecurities impacting the relationships, you don't want to go out. And then when you don't want to go out, you start feeling lonely. Eventually, it started as just one issue and it's going bang, 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 bang. And a lot of aspects of life are beginning, as I mentioned before, they're beginning to lose their purpose or they're beginning to lose their meaningful, they're beginning to lose their meaning. And that can kill a young man. That not just emotionally, that but I feel as if that is a big reason because once young men become so absorbed into this negativity, suicide, as unfortunate as it is, might seem like the only escape. So, and it's not even just pornography at times, just that stereotype, like we said before, it can be so damaging for a male. And especially in older males, since it's so ingrained and since that stereotype of masculinity is so timeless, it goes back generations and it almost seems impossible to smash. That's and that's scary. That's scary to think. But I feel as if we're making progress. We really are. So it's very difficult. Once we look at all that, it's very difficult to come to a conclusion on how we can mitigate loneliness because it does seem like loneliness is gonna stay here for a very long time. But if we keep doing the right things, if we keep taking small steps into the right direction, I feel as if we can do something. We can do something great. And I say we as Top Blokes and as the general community.
Absolutely. And I wish we had more time to kind of share that sort of key topic that we discussed as a council, which was the harmful impacts of pornography. But fortunately, we will share more in the future because we did provide a submission to the inquiry into the harmful impacts of pornography. And I think of all groups that will be providing a submission, I think, young men being able to talk about it is so critical because like you said, it impacts you, it impacts you as a generation. And it is the first generation to I guess, experience pornography in the way that it currently is. And I think that's a really good call out to talk about the connection between that and loneliness, because I don't think people realize that. I don't think they realize that at all. So just to kind of wrap up this section, I would love to ask each of you. So obviously we've got people watching and those who couldn't make it, they'll get the recording as well. If there is a hope that you have for the people who are watching right now and joining us, what is one action that you would love for them to take? I'm going to start with you, Nick. What is one action that you hope those would take?
This is tough. Hold on.
I can come back to you.
No, I think I've got it. I I think it just comes down to as basic as just spreading the message. As long as that can actually get out to those certain communities, it works perfectly.
Love that. Absolutely. We need more people talking about mental health, more people connecting with others, and more people raising. And you know what? Sorry, is this my hope now? But you know, you hit a really good point there, Nick. More people like just checking in on the young men in their lives as well, right? So I love that. Thank you. What about you, Dan? What's your hope for people to take action?
Well, my hope was what you just said is just checking up on people that are looking more isolated as a whole and are just not talking as much, always checking up on them, even if they're just an independent person, but just checking up on them, just checking if they're okay in that. And just saying, oh, like hope you're having a good day, like if you need someone to reach out to, always here. Just something like that can just make a difference in someone's day and it can change a lot in someone's life as well and we don't realize it. It's like people say, the most littlest things can have the biggest impacts. So yeah, that's mine.
Of that, absolutely. And doing that doesn't take much time, right? Doesn't take much time to check in, and it's free to do as well.
Yeah.
Definitely. And Salim, finish with you. What is your hope that people can action out of today?
I hope that the older generation, and especially us, we can learn from our mistakes. Because personally, well, not just personally, but generationally, we have been raised on our devices. And I don't hate my parents for raising me on an iPad because who were they to know the impact that it would have? We are the next generation. We need to fix it. We have unfortunately suffered, but in turn, we now know the impacts and we now know what future we can chisel out for our children. So we need to learn from our mistakes and just keep going forward.
Love that. Thank you. Well, thank you all so much. Like I said, we could continue talking for a much longer time, but I really want to thank you for joining us, but also sharing a little bit about your story and your thoughts and your wishes as well. Really appreciate it. Okay, so next we're going to introduce two incredible Top Blokes youth workers, Nick and Keely. So these mentors have seen firsthand how the boys in our program have grown and have changed. So Nick and Keely just this year alone have delivered over 30 mentoring programs and supported over 300 young males. So Nick and Keely, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for
Thanks
having
for
us.
having us.
Fantastic. Now you get a really small amount of time, so we're not going to don't have that much time, only a couple of minutes. But I would love to hand it over to you to maybe share some reflections or insights about your time mentoring young men in the Top Blokes program.
Yeah, cool. So unfortunately, I wasn't a mentor to these young legends here tonight specifically, but as you said earlier, Mel, I have mentored a handful of young men in New South Wales. I have only met these incredible young men tonight once before this, and that was only for 1 hour. Honestly, 1 hour is all we need each week to see the young men of this program. We meet them as boys. We see them coming in hesitant and resistant to the program. We see their willingness or hesitation to speak up. And we see the way they interact with their friends and us as strangers. Over the 6 months that we spend together, though, we see them become more comfortable, where they open up, share about their personal life, share their deeper thoughts and concepts about concepts that were once foreign to them. And by the end of the program, they find their voice. Ultimately, we see them challenging the stereotypes that are so familiar to our communities, as Nick touched on before. And we also see them building stronger connections within their schoolmates, where they were friends or not before the program. similar to Slim's experience. And as a mentor, I feel so privileged to see these young males for the individuals that they are. By the end of the 6 months, we see them not as boys that we met them as, but as the men that make up the next generation in our community. After hearing these boys speak only twice now, I'm continued to be blown away and inspired by them. My favorite part of this job as a youth worker is meeting young males like this, seeing them grow, how they continue to work to better themselves, and seeing the connections they've made with each other. It's incredible.
Yeah, love that. Thanks, Keely. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, to add on to all the gold that we've heard this evening, I want to really just highlight that as a mentor, I get the privilege of going in and meeting, a group of usually 12 to 14 skeptical young men of like, oh, why am I in this program? But they're so curious. And I think that's the richness of this upcoming generation is they are rich in curiosity. They, though maybe have skepticism, they are so open to learn and so open to grow. And I think they have felt that maybe there's a need to figure life out for themselves or learn out on the go. But Top Blokes really introduces a way where young men can talk about the discussions rather than figure it out for themselves and have these relationships and not just learn how to connect with mentors, but connect with each other and peers. And being in a school environment, it's really awesome to connect with the school around them and their local community. So I think there's a lot of advantages. So yeah, as a mentor, it's honestly just such a privilege. And you've heard from three amazing young men, and I can attest that throughout across both New South Wales and Queensland, there are far, and even Australia, I reckon, there are far more young men with such bright ideas and such great vision for themselves and each other.
Absolutely. And we've mentored 4,600 young men, right? So that we just met three tonight. Can you imagine all their other stories? And that's why the grad club is so critical to Top Blokes because, the 6 months is a long time, right, for a mentoring program, but really that is the start of their journey. And it's so amazing to know that they can be supported, not just by Top Blokes, but by the community that they're creating with the grad club as well. And we spoke obviously earlier around loneliness and connection. So could you share what you kind of observe in the programs? Like you said, boys are coming in skeptical, they may or may not know each other, but what does that journey look like week on week? Then by the end, they're feeling pretty close as a group. Can you take us through what you observe?
Can I shoot, Keely, if that's cool?
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. I'll tell you about one particular group that I think reflects most of the groups that I've seen. So yeah, we have this group of diverse young men, and usually first week to a couple of weeks, they're getting to know of each other, they're learning, they're building trust even with us as mentors. But by around 3 to 4 weeks in, I truly believe is when you start to see the walls come down, when we start to talk about mental health and we start to talk about some confronting conversations, we actually start to see the boys attest so much more to their story or their perceptions of life. But what that does is it creates a space where if one speaks up, the rest start to see that this space is so trusted and so brave, where boys can really voice what they feel and it is collectively safe and there is support around them. The best part, I remember one graduation we had is we were blessed to have the school fund some food, and they put it in this corner table around like these chairs and stuff. And all the boys were just chatting and laughing and all sitting around. And the craziest part is if you saw them in the first session, they would have been sitting in 4 different corners of a room. So I think it really makes a difference from like this usually quiet or skeptical or even unsure group to these confident, bright, vibrant young men who are sharing and laughing over food and just having great chats and even like pulling fun and ideas that they had from previous sessions, and they're celebrating well. I think that's the common thing. You start to see that introductory phase, that growing and development stage, and then the result is just instrumental with these confident, bright, aspiring young men. It's amazing, and it's pretty much every time.
Right. What about you, Keely? What do you observe?
Yeah, similar to what Nick said, like with the mental health workshop, that's pretty much where they start to open up. There's always that like drop mid-workshop where they're realizing that it's their friends that this is who it's affecting, or they start to realize, like, remember the people that it has affected. I personally love when it comes into like healthy relationships and talking about connections and conflict resolution, where the boys start to open up a lot more as well. We had a group of boys once who they generally were the group that joked around a lot and they'd always have like really like, you know, outlandish jokes. But then when it come to talking about consent and relationships, they were so quiet the entire time. And afterwards they come up to us and they were like, thank you so much. Like no one else tells us this stuff. They're like, I'm so glad that this is something that Top Blokes is teaching. And just to even have the ability to say that in front of each other, like they weren't the type of group that at the beginning, like they're all the ones who try to like outdo each other and tell each other, like tell everyone the stories that they've done on the weekends or whatever. But when it come to that one, they were all so open about it and they all like thanked us so much for it. So it was nice to see that vulnerability in the group.
Definitely. No, that's great. And I think, you know, one thing that I think is really positive, like I think one thing that we know at Top Blokes, but we're starting to hear more people talk openly about, and we saw it at the inquiry last week at Parliament, is kind of smashing the stereotype that boys don't want to open up. Like we see day in and day out, they are just waiting for opportunities, whether it is to open up or to connect or to talk or to learn. And it's not just young men. I think it's, you know, men in general. And so I think it's great that you've been able to share those insights and reflections with us, and keep doing the good work that you're doing. Thanks, Nick and Keely. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mel. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And so I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. I think we've got one final slide that we're going to put up, and we've also just put another link in the chat so you can find out more about Wishes for Change. But as you heard, you know, from Salim and Dan and Nick as well, we would love to invite you to support their wishes. And you can support Top Blokes in a number of ways. The first one is we've got the QR code up on the screen. If you were in a position to make a donation, every dollar that we receive is an opportunity for us to reach more young men. And I know that our Youth Ambassador Council are really keen that the Top Blokes program can get to more young men in 2025. So we would really appreciate if you were in a position to give. Of course, we would love for you to also follow us on socials. We're on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok. We're on TikTok as well. So we would love for you to follow and to hear from obviously what is happening in our programs, but to hear from more young men like that you've met tonight. If you have a workplace and your workplace has a passion for mental health or for youth, we would love to connect with you and see if there are ways in 2025 that we and your workplace can work together so that more young men can get access to the Top Blokes program. And of course, if you haven't already, you are more than welcome to subscribe to our newsletter and visit our website as well. So as we wrap up, I want to obviously take a moment to thank everyone who's joined us tonight. So we've got Salim, Dan, Nick, Dr. Christina Jarron, Nick and Keely for their final words and reflections. And of course, I want to thank you, our supporters and donors. You are there every step of the way with us. Thank you. Thank you for being there with us, walking this journey alongside us and engaging with us in this important conversation. So together we can help create a world where loneliness is replaced by deep connection and every young man is given the tools and the confidence to live healthy and safe lives. Thank you for joining us and we'll see you next time. Bye.